I was 7 years old when they took my mother away. I remember standing in our living room, clutching my stuffed bear, watching as police officers led her out in handcuffs. She was crying, reaching for me, calling my name. Sophia. Baby, I didn't do this. I'm innocent. But I didn't run to her. I was too scared, too confused. My Aunt Beatrice held me back, her fingers digging into my shoulders. Don't look at her, sweetie, Aunt Beatrice whispered. That woman killed someone. She's dangerous. The trial lasted 3 months. I was kept away from it, protected from the details, they said. But children hear things. I heard the whispers at school, the way other kids' parents looked at me with pity and fear. My mother, Catherine Blake, was convicted of murdering her business partner, a woman named Helena Cross. The evidence was overwhelming, everyone said. Witnesses, financial records, physical evidence. She was sentenced to 25 years in prison. Aunt Beatrice became my guardian. She was my mother's younger sister, and she tried her best to give me a normal life. But nothing was normal anymore. I grew up carrying the weight of my mother's crime. Every birthday, every school event, every milestone was shadowed by the knowledge that my mother was a murderer. Aunt Beatrice never spoke badly about her directly, but she didn't need to. The silence was enough. Sometimes I'd catch her looking at old photographs of them together, tears in her eyes, mourning the sister she'd lost. My mother wrote me letters from prison. At first, they came every week, protesting her innocence, begging me to believe her, to visit her. I never read past the first few lines. Aunt Beatrice said it was unhealthy, that my mother was in denial, that reading her lies would only confuse me. So I stopped opening them altogether. They piled up in a box in my closet, unopened, unread. By the time I turned 12, I'd convinced myself I hated her. How could a mother abandon her child? How could she commit such a terrible crime? The hate felt safer than confusion, easier than the painful question of whether I should have listened. When I turned 18, I legally changed my last name from Blake to Morrison, taking Aunt Beatrice's surname. It felt like shedding a skin, becoming someone new. I went to college and studied business, trying to build a life separate from my past. But the past has a way of following you. During my junior year, I took a forensic accounting class where we studied financial fraud cases. Our professor assigned us a project: analyze a real criminal case involving financial crime. I chose my mother's case. I told myself it was just academic curiosity, nothing more. I wanted to understand how someone could be stupid enough to leave such obvious evidence. The prosecution had argued that my mother had been stealing from the textile company she'd founded with Helena Cross. When Helena discovered the theft, my mother had killed her to silence her, then tried to frame it as a suicide. The case file was public record. I spent weeks going through trial transcripts, financial documents, witness statements. The evidence truly did seem overwhelming. Bank transfers to an offshore account allegedly belonging to my mother. Emails between my mother and Helena arguing about money. Testimony from Helena's husband about threatening calls. My mother's fingerprints on the paperweight used as the weapon. And testimony from my mother's best friend, Veronica Sterling, who'd witnessed them having a violent argument. It all fit together perfectly. Too perfectly, I realized one night at 3 a.m., staring at financial records on my laptop. That's when I noticed the first inconsistency. The offshore account supposedly belonging to my mother had been opened using her information, but the signature on the bank documents didn't match my mother's signature on other legal documents. I compared them side by side. The loops were different, the pressure points didn't match. It was a good forgery, but it was still a forgery. My hands shook as I made the discovery. I dug deeper. The emails between my mother and Helena had been recovered from Helena's computer, but the metadata showed they'd all been created on the same day, 2 days after Helena's death. Someone had backdated them. The more I investigated, the more inconsistencies I found. Small things that individually meant little, but together painted a picture of a frame-up. Someone had very carefully constructed evidence to implicate my mother. But who? And why? I made a list of everyone involved. Helena's husband, Marcus. My mother's best friend Veronica, who'd testified against her. The company's accountant. The investigating detective. I decided to start with Veronica. Veronica Sterling had been my mother's closest friend, almost like family. I had vague memories of her from childhood, a glamorous woman with blonde hair and expensive jewelry, always laughing. She testified that she'd witnessed my mother and Helena arguing violently about money, that my mother had threatened Helena. Her testimony had been devastating to the defense. But something bothered me. She'd been so certain, so detailed in her account, yet she hadn't reported the argument to anyone at the time. She'd only come forward after my mother was arrested, claiming she'd been afraid but felt obligated to tell the truth. I tracked Veronica to a large house in the suburbs, about an hour from where I lived. When I arrived on a Saturday morning, I was struck by how expensive everything looked. The house was modern and beautiful, with a perfectly manicured lawn, a far cry from the modest apartment Veronica had lived in when I was a child. I rang the doorbell, my heart pounding. Veronica answered and didn't recognize me at first. "Can I help you? Mrs. Sterling? My name is Sophia Morrison. I'm Catherine Blake's daughter." The color drained from her face. Veronica hesitated, then stepped aside. "Come in." Her living room was decorated with expensive furniture and original artwork. We sat in awkward silence. "What do you want to know?" Veronica asked finally. "I'm doing research on the case for a college project," I lied. "You testified that you witnessed an argument between my mother and Helena. Can you tell me about that?" Veronica's hands twisted in her lap. It was terrible. They were screaming at each other. Helena accused Catherine of stealing money. Catherine threatened to destroy Helena if she said anything. I was afraid for Helena. "But you didn't report this to anyone at the time. Why not?" "I didn't think Catherine would actually hurt her," Veronica said. "When Helena died, I realized I should have taken it more seriously." Her answer sounded rehearsed, like she'd perfected it over the years. "I decided to push harder. I've been looking at the financial records. The signature on the offshore account doesn't match my mother's real signature." Veronica's expression flickered with something, fear? Anger? But it was gone too quickly. "I'm not a handwriting expert. The court accepted that evidence." "They did. But courts make mistakes." I paused. "Don't you think it's strange?" Veronica stood abruptly. "Sophia, I understand you want to believe your mother is innocent. But I was there. I saw what I saw. Catherine killed Helena, and she's paying the price for it." "Or someone wanted everyone to think she did," I said quietly. Veronica's face hardened. "I think you should leave." As she walked me to the door, I noticed a photograph on her hall table showing Veronica and a man standing in front of a yacht. The man had his arm around her waist possessively. "Who's that?" I asked, pointing to the photo. "That's my husband, Marcus," Veronica said. My blood ran cold. "Marcus? As in Marcus Cross? Helena's husband?" Veronica's smile was thin. "Yes. We married 3 years after Helena's death. We found comfort in each other during that difficult time." I stared at her, pieces clicking together. Veronica and Marcus. My mother's best friend and her business partner's husband. Together. How long were you two involved before Helena died? I asked bluntly. Veronica's face flushed with anger. "Get out. Now." I left, my mind racing. If Veronica and Marcus had been having an affair before Helena's death, they both had motive. And with my mother in prison, they'd gotten everything: the company, Helena's life insurance, each other. I drove straight to the prison where my mother was incarcerated. For the first time in 17 years, I was going to visit her. The prison was grim, all concrete and barbed wire. After going through security, I waited in a sterile visiting room. When they brought my mother out, I almost didn't recognize her. She was 52 but looked older, her dark hair streaked with gray, her face lined with hardship. But her eyes, those were still the same eyes I saw in my mirror every day. She stopped when she saw me, tears immediately streaming down her face. "Sophia," she whispered. "You came." We sat across from each other, separated by a table and 17 years of silence. "I've been reading about your case," I said. "For a college project." Mom wiped her eyes with shaking hands. "And what did you find?" "Inconsistencies. Evidence that doesn't add up. And I found out that Veronica married Marcus Cross." Mom's expression turned bitter. "I tried to tell my lawyer about their affair. I knew they'd been seeing each other behind Helena's back. But there was no proof, and it just made me look desperate. "Tell me everything," I said. "From the beginning. What really happened?" My mother took a deep breath and began. She and Helena had been business partners for 12 years, running a successful textile import company. They'd been friends, trusted each other. Veronica had been my mother's best friend since college, always around, always involved in their lives. "I didn't know about Veronica and Marcus," Mom said. "Not until after I was arrested. But looking back, there were signs. The way they looked at each other. How Marcus always seemed to know things only Veronica would have known." About 6 months before Helena's death, my mother had noticed financial irregularities. Small amounts missing, discrepancies in the books. She'd mentioned it to Helena, and they'd started investigating together. "We thought it was our accountant skimming money," Mom explained. "We were gathering evidence." But then Helena started acting strange. Distant. She cancelled meetings. She seemed scared. The day before Helena died, she'd called my mother in a panic. She said she'd figured out who was stealing from the company, but she needed to verify something before she could tell me. She was supposed to meet me the next morning to show me what she'd found. But Helena never made it to that meeting. She was found dead in her office that evening. The police immediately focused on my mother because of the fabricated evidence, the offshore account, the fake emails, the fingerprints on the paperweight. "I'd touched that paperweight 100 times, Mom said. It sat on Helena's desk. But they made it seem like I'd used it to kill her." And Veronica's testimony about the alleged argument had sealed her fate. "She lied," Mom said, her voice shaking. "We never had that argument. Veronica fabricated the whole thing. I trusted her, and she destroyed my life." "Why didn't anyone believe you?" I asked. "Because the evidence was so compelling," Mom said sadly. "Someone had planned this carefully. And my public defender was overworked and underfunded. We couldn't afford expert witnesses to challenge the forensics. It was my word against mountains of evidence." "But you had me," I said, guilt washing over me. "I could have testified that you'd never hurt anyone." Mom's eyes filled with tears. "Sophia, you were 7 years old. They'd already turned you against me. I didn't want you traumatized further by being part of the trial." "I hated you," I whispered. "I spent 17 years hating you for something you didn't do." "I know," Mom said gently. "And I don't blame you. You were protecting yourself." We talked until visiting time was up. As I left, Mom called after me. "Sophia, if you're really going to look into this, be careful. Whoever framed me has gotten away with murder for 17 years. They won't want the truth to come out." I promised to be careful, but I was already formulating a plan. I needed proof, real concrete evidence that would stand up in court. I started by hiring a private investigator named Felix Tran. He was young but had a good reputation for corporate investigations. I showed Felix everything I'd found, the signature discrepancies, the email metadata, the suspicious relationship between Veronica and Marcus. "This is interesting," Felix said. "But it's not enough for an appeal. We need something definitive." "What about the original evidence?" I suggested. "Could we have it re-examined?" Felix nodded. "Possibly. But that requires legal motions, and lawyers are expensive." I didn't have much money. I was a college student with minimal savings. But I wasn't going to let that stop me. I started a crowdfunding campaign online, telling my mother's story and asking for help to prove her innocence. The response was overwhelming. Within 2 weeks, I'd raised $50,000 from strangers who believed in justice. With that money, I hired Kimberly Torres, a lawyer who specialized in wrongful conviction cases. Kimberly was sharp and experienced. She immediately saw the problems with my mother's case. "The email metadata alone should have been caught by competent defense," she said. "And these signature discrepancies are significant. Let me file a motion for a new trial based on newly discovered evidence." While Kimberly worked on the legal side, Felix and I investigated Veronica and Marcus. Felix discovered that Marcus had taken out a massive life insurance policy on Helena just 3 months before her death. The timing was highly suspicious. Felix also found that Veronica's struggling jewelry business had received a large cash infusion 2 months after my mother's conviction. The source? An anonymous investor that Felix traced to a shell company registered in Marcus's name. They funded her business with stolen money, Felix explained. This establishes both motive and benefit from framing your mother. But we needed more. We needed someone who could testify to what really happened. Felix had been interviewing former employees of the textile company, and one of them, Helena's administrative assistant, a woman named Paula, agreed to meet with us. What she told us changed everything. I felt guilty about this for years, Paula said during our interview at her home. But I was scared. Marcus Cross threatened my family. She explained that on the day Helena died, she'd seen Veronica enter Helena's office around 6 p.m. Veronica had told Paula to go home early, that Helena wanted privacy for an important phone call. But Helena's car was still in the parking lot, Paula said. And when I left, Veronica was still in there with her. The next morning, Helena was found dead, and they said Catherine had killed her the previous evening. Why? Didn't you tell the police? I asked. Paula's eyes filled with tears. I tried. But Marcus came to my house the night after Helena's funeral. He said if I told anyone what I'd seen, something terrible would happen to my children. He knew where they went to school, their names, everything. I was terrified. Will you testify now? Kimberly asked. Paula looked at her children's photos on the mantel. My kids are grown now, living in other states. Marcus can't hurt them anymore. Yes, I'll testify. Helena was a good person. She deserves justice, and so does Catherine. With Paula's testimony, we had a witness placing Veronica at the scene. But we needed one more piece. We needed to prove conspiracy. Felix suggested we try to get Veronica or Marcus to incriminate themselves. People who've kept secrets for 17 years often crack under pressure, he said. Especially when they think they're about to get caught. We decided I should confront them one more time, but this time wearing a recording device. In our state, only one party needed to consent to recording, so it was legal. I went back to Veronica's house on a Wednesday afternoon. This time, Marcus answered the door. He was tall and distinguished-looking, with silver hair and cold blue eyes. Can I help you? I'm here to see Veronica. I'm Sophia Morrison. Recognition flashed across his face, followed by something darker. Veronica isn't home. That's okay. Maybe you can help me. I have some questions about Helena's death. Marcus's jaw tightened. Your mother was convicted in a court of law. The case is closed. Is it? I asked. Because I found some interesting evidence. Like the life insurance policy you took out on Helena 3 months before she died. Or that you've been having an affair with Veronica since before Helena's death. Marcus stepped outside, closing the door. His voice was low and threatening. You need to stop digging into things that don't concern you. My mother is innocent, I said firmly, the recording device capturing every word. And you know it because you and Veronica framed her. Marcus laughed without humor. You can't prove anything. Even if what you're saying was true, which it isn't, it's been 17 years. No one cares about ancient history. I care, I said. Helena figured out that Veronica was embezzling from the company, didn't she? Is that why you killed her? Get off my property before I call the police. Call them. I'd love to show them what I've found. That's when Veronica's car pulled into the driveway. She got out, saw me, and her face went pale. What is she doing here? Veronica demanded. She's leaving, Marcus said. But I pressed on. I know you killed Helena. I know you framed my mother. And I have a witness who saw you in Helena's office the night she died. Veronica's composure cracked completely. That's impossible. Paula would never, she stopped, realizing what she'd just admitted. Paula's name had never been mentioned. There was no way Veronica could have known who I was talking about unless she'd actually been there and had specifically threatened Paula. Paula would never what? I pressed. Testify? Tell the truth about how you murdered Helena. Marcus grabbed Veronica's arm. Don't say another word. She's recording this. Too late, I said, pulling out my phone and showing them the recording app. Veronica's face crumpled. Years of guilt and fear cascaded over her all at once. The facade she'd maintained for 17 years shattered in an instant. "I never meant for it to go this far," she whispered. "Helena was going to expose everything, the money I'd taken, the affair. She was going to destroy both of us." I panicked. I picked up the paperweight and hit her. I didn't mean to kill her, but when she fell. "Veronica, shut up," Marcus shouted, trying to pull her toward the house. But she shook him off, tears streaming down her face. "I'm tired, Marcus. I'm tired of the nightmares, tired of looking over my shoulder, tired of pretending. It's been 17 years of hell." She turned to me, her voice breaking. "Marcus helped me stage everything to look like Catherine had done it. We'd already been stealing Catherine's information to cover up the embezzlement. It was easy to redirect everything toward her. We forged the documents, planted the evidence, created the emails, paid off the accountant. Everything." Marcus lunged for my phone, but I was faster. I ran to my car and locked the doors, immediately uploading the recording to cloud storage as Marcus pounded on my window. I called Kimberly immediately. "I have it," I told her, my voice shaking with adrenaline. "I have their confession. Everything." The police arrived within 20 minutes. I played the recording for them right there in Veronica's driveway. They arrested both Veronica and Marcus on the spot. Veronica went quietly, almost relieved. Marcus shouted threats and protests all the way to the police car. Over the next few weeks, the case unraveled quickly. Faced with the recorded confession, Paula's testimony, and the mounting evidence Felix and Kimberly had gathered, Veronica agreed to a full confession in exchange for a reduced sentence. She provided details about everything: how Helena had confronted her about the embezzlement that evening, how the murder had been unplanned but the cover-up had been meticulously calculated, how Marcus had used his connections to ensure certain evidence was found, and other evidence was overlooked. The story made national news. "Innocent woman spent 17 years in prison, while best friend lived free," read the headlines. Public outcry was immediate and fierce. 3 months after Veronica's arrest, my mother walked out of prison a free woman. I was there waiting for her, along with Aunt Beatrice, who'd been devastated to learn her sister had been innocent all along. Mom emerged into the sunlight, blinking and disoriented after 17 years behind bars. When she saw me, she broke down completely. This time, no one held me back. I ran to her and hugged her for the first time since I was 7 years old. "I'm so sorry, Mom," I cried into her shoulder. "I'm so sorry I didn't believe you. I'm sorry for all the letters I never read, all the years I wasted hating you." Mom held me tight, her whole body shaking with sobs. "You were a child, baby. You have nothing to apologize for. You gave me back my life. You never gave up on finding the truth." We stood there in the prison parking lot, holding each other and crying, beginning the long process of healing 17 years of wounds. Aunt Beatrice joined us, apologizing through her own tears for not believing her sister. "You were trying to protect Sophia," Mom said, embracing her. "You gave her stability when her world fell apart. I'll always be grateful for that." The legal aftermath took months. My mother filed a wrongful conviction lawsuit against the state and received a substantial settlement, though no amount of money could return the years that had been stolen from her. Veronica Sterling received 15 years for voluntary manslaughter and conspiracy. Marcus Cross received 25 years for murder, evidence tampering, witness intimidation, and fraud. Mom got a small apartment and started the difficult process of rebuilding a life outside prison walls. Everything had changed in 17 years: technology, social norms, even the layout of our city. I helped her navigate it all, teaching her how to use a smartphone, showing her streaming services, introducing her to a world she'd missed. We started therapy together, working through the complicated emotions of our relationship. There was grief for the lost years, anger at the injustice, and the awkward reality that we were essentially strangers who happened to share DNA and deep love. "I missed your entire childhood," Mom said during one session, tears streaming down her face. "Your first dance, your graduation, your heartbreaks. I missed everything." "We can't get those years back," our therapist said gently. "But you can build new memories moving forward." And we did. We had weekly dinners together. Mom came to my law school graduation. I changed my major after everything that happened, determined to help other wrongfully convicted people. She met my boyfriend and gave her cautious approval. We took a vacation together, just the two of us, to the beach. Slowly, carefully, we built a relationship from the ashes of what had been destroyed. One evening, about a year after her release, Mom asked if I'd read the letters she'd written me over the years. "I want you to read them now," she said, handing me the box I'd kept in my closet for so long. "Not because I need you to feel guilty, but because I want you to know that I never stopped loving you, never stopped hoping." I spent that night reading 17 years of letters. Letters about her daily life in prison, about holidays and birthdays she'd missed, about her hopes and fears. Letters where she processed her anger and grief and slowly found peace. Letters where she never stopped proclaiming her innocence and her love for me. The earliest letters were desperate, pleading. The middle years showed resignation and sadness. But the later letters showed something remarkable. She'd found strength and peace even in the darkness of wrongful imprisonment. "I've decided to forgive Veronica and Marcus," one letter from year 14 read. "Not because what they did was okay, but because holding on to hatred is like drinking poison and expecting them to die. I forgive them for my own peace, not theirs." By the time I finished reading, the sun was rising. Mom had fallen asleep in her chair. I covered her with a blanket and studied her peaceful face. This woman had lost 17 years of her life to a crime she didn't commit. She'd lost her daughter, her freedom, her reputation. But she'd never lost her integrity or her capacity to love. 6 months later, I graduated from law school and immediately joined the Innocence Project, a non-profit dedicated to exonerating wrongly convicted people. My first case was heartbreakingly similar to my mother's, a woman framed by someone she trusted, convicted on fabricated evidence, spending years in prison while the real criminal walked free. "This is why you do this work," my supervisor said. "You understand what these people are going through in a way most lawyers never will." Mom started speaking at criminal justice reform conferences, sharing her story and advocating for changes to prevent wrongful convictions. She was nervous at first, but she discovered she had a powerful voice. "The system failed me," she told audiences. "But it doesn't have to fail others. We can demand better investigations, better forensic standards, better funding for public defenders. We can make sure what happened to me doesn't happen to anyone else." Her advocacy, combined with several high-profile exoneration cases, led to significant reforms in our state. New requirements for preserving evidence. Mandatory recording of interrogations. Better funding for indigent defense. Reforms that would have made a difference in her case. One evening, 2 years after her release, we attended a gala for the Innocence Project. Former exonerees shared their stories. Lawyers and activists discussed ongoing cases. During the dinner, a woman approached our table. She was in her 60s, well-dressed, with kind eyes. "Catherine Blake?" she asked. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but I had to tell you, your story saved my nephew's life." She explained that her nephew had been accused of a crime he didn't commit. The family had been ready to accept a plea deal, afraid of going to trial. "But then I heard you speak about your case," the woman said. "About how you accepted the evidence against you seemed overwhelming, but you were innocent. It inspired us to fight. We hired a better lawyer, got the evidence re-examined, and found the inconsistencies. My nephew was exonerated last month." Mom's eyes filled with tears. "I'm so glad," she said. "That's wonderful." After the woman left, Mom turned to me. "Do you know what that means? That something good came from those 17 years. That my suffering wasn't completely meaningless." "Your suffering was never meaningless," I said. "It taught me about resilience, about fighting for truth, about never giving up. It changed the trajectory of my entire life." That night, as we drove home together, Mom said something I'd never forget. "I used to lie in my cell and wonder what I'd do if I ever got out. I fantasized about revenge, about making Veronica and Marcus suffer the way they'd made me suffer. But now that I'm here," she continued, "I realize that the best revenge is living well. Building a life they can't touch, relationships they can't destroy, purpose they can't take away. They stole 17 years, but they don't get to steal the rest of my life." 3 years after her exoneration, Mom did something unexpected. She started a small textile business, the same industry she'd worked in before. "I'm not going to let them take this from me too," she said. "I loved this work. I was good at it. I'm reclaiming it." Her business started small, but word spread about her story. Clients wanted to support her. Former colleagues reached out to help. Within a year, she had a thriving small company built on ethical practices and transparent accounting. Everything they accused me of, embezzlement, dishonesty, betrayal, I'm proving the opposite, she told me proudly. Every honest transaction, every transparent report, every ethical decision is a testament to who I really am. I watched my mother rebuild not just her business, but her entire sense of self. The woman who walked out of prison broken and disoriented had transformed into someone stronger, more purposeful, more alive than I'd ever seen her. And our relationship, once destroyed by lies and separation, had been rebuilt on a foundation of truth and hard-won trust. On the 5th anniversary of her release, we held a celebration. Aunt Beatrice was there, along with Kimberly Torres, Felix Tran, Paula, who'd become a close friend, and several other exonerees Mom had mentored. We gathered in Mom's apartment, modest but comfortable, decorated with photos of all the moments we'd shared since her release. I want to say something, Mom announced, raising her glass. 5 years ago, I walked out of prison after 17 years of wrongful imprisonment. I was angry, broken, and terrified of a world that had moved on without me. But I was also free in ways I'd never been even before prison. She looked at me, her eyes shining with tears. My daughter, who had every reason to hate me, who'd been taught to believe I was a monster, chose to search for the truth. She chose to believe in me when no one else would. She gave me back not just my freedom, but my life, my purpose, my family. I stood and hugged her as everyone applauded. You gave me something too, I said. You showed me what real strength looks like. What integrity means. What it means to forgive even when you've been deeply wronged. Later that night, after everyone had left, Mom and I sat on her balcony watching the city lights. Do you still hate me? Mom asked quietly. I looked at her in surprise. I never hated you. I hated the person they told me you were, the murderer, the criminal, the woman who'd abandoned me. But that person never existed. I took her hand. The real you, the woman who maintained her innocence for 17 years, who never stopped loving me even when I wouldn't visit, who forgave the people who destroyed her life, who turned suffering into purpose. I could never hate her. I admire her more than anyone in the world. Mom squeezed my hand, tears flowing freely now. I used to wonder if I'd survive prison. Then I wondered if I'd survive freedom. But the truth is, I've done more than survive. I've lived. Really lived, maybe for the first time. We sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. Somewhere across town, Veronica Sterling was in prison, serving the sentence my mother had once served. Marcus Cross was there too, both of them finally paying for their crimes. The truth had prevailed, but not easily, not quickly, and not without cost. Yet sitting there with my mother, my incredible, resilient, innocent mother, I realized that some truths are worth fighting for no matter how long it takes. Some relationships are worth rebuilding no matter how broken they seem. And sometimes, the people we're taught to hate are actually the heroes of our stories. We'd lost 17 years. But we had the rest of our lives. And that was enough.